So Bobby, tell me about yourself.
I was born and raised in the west end of Rock Island. My wife Christy and I, we've been married for 28 years. We have 10 children. I like to tell folks that we have 4.5 dozen. We have 4 girls and 6 boys. So truly blessed. And nothing was given to me. I had to work hard for everything all my life. Dad started me out doing paper routes. Had to do dishes at our restaurant at 8 years old. But still some pretty darn good values in me, helped to form me into the person that I am today.
You know, what strikes me about you is that you were, before you were serving in Congress, you were actually serving your community already. And in many ways, you've been serving your community even after Congress. You told me a story earlier about a family who lost their son in Afghanistan, I believe, and they didn't have a place to kind of be together after the funeral. Tell me about that.
Yeah, one day I was coming out of church at Christ the King in Moline, Illinois, and I had a gentleman come up to me and ask me if I knew about the service member that had died, and I didn't, and he told me the visitation was that day. And as a sitting member of Congress, I thought, the right thing to do is to go pay my respects to this American hero. And I went to the visitation at the funeral home, and when I walked in, I could tell that the family didn't have a whole lot. And I went around, I greeted folks and told them who I was. And as I got over to the widow, I just looked at her and I said, "Ma'am," I said, "I have a pizza store right here in Moline, Illinois." I said, "We're closed on Sunday." And I said, "We would be more than happy to open it up for all of your family and friends." And she looked at me and she started to tear up, and she says, "Oh my gosh," she goes, "we were looking for a place to go." And it was pretty awesome because I called up my family members, and so we had all of the Schilling kids in there making pizza and scrubbing dishes, but it filled up the place, and we ended up having 62 people show up, and that's exactly the amount of people that our restaurant holds. So it was very nice, and it was the right thing to do, I believe.
So hold on one second. A lot of pizza places don't close on Sunday. Is there a reason you were closed on Sunday?
Yeah, this was a discussion my wife and I had for actually a few months, and she said, we're supposed to be closed on the Sabbath. And the Pope at the time was calling for restaurants to close on Sundays and businesses in general. And she said, "You know what, just pray about it, think about it." And I did that, and we closed the restaurant on Sunday, which was very difficult for me to do because it's the third best day of the week. And lo and behold, what was interesting is that our business actually did not suffer one bit. It actually increased by a significant amount, and I think it was just blessings being poured upon us. But it was just that leap of faith, knowing that it was the right thing to do. So it was a pretty good thing for us.
Tell me about how that work ethic, saving your money, helped you in later life to understand. I mean, sort of give me the sense of what that work ethic means to you now.
The work ethic that I learned growing up is huge. When Christy and I first got married back in 1986, I'll never forget this. It was a 1977 vehicle that the headliner was always, when it'd get real hot out, the headliner would blow down and hit you in the head. So you had to keep the windows up in order to keep it from blowing around. And the car, of course, it didn't have any air conditioning. So, but I think overall just the hard work paid off for me. And then what I would do is every once in a while I'd pick a car up and I'd get a good deal on it, clean it all up, and then I'd end up selling it and make a little bit of money through the course of years. We started out actually in a duplex where we rented out one side and we lived in the other. Pretty humble beginnings there on 41st Street and 18th Avenue in Rock Island. But it was nice because it allowed for us to have our own place. And then what we ended up doing is we continued to work very hard. I worked in the shop at McMillan Blodell Containers. We made corrugated boxes. I was part of the International Paperworkers Union there. I was actually a union steward for a couple of years, and they ended up selling out to another company. But from there I went on to the financial services industry. I worked for Prudential Insurance Company of America, where I was part of the UFCW, and I wasn't in a leadership role there, but did quite a bit of work for folks. Finished up number 315 out of about 13,500 agents. it's all about hard work. And that's what's so awesome about this country, is that if you're willing to work hard and you play by the rules, you really truly can get ahead. And that's the big thing that Dad always told us kids growing up, is that if you stay out of trouble and you stay focused, you can really do pretty much whatever you want. And I'm living proof that can happen. Somebody that works hard and does what they're supposed to be doing is, they can run a pizza store and decide one day that they're going to run for Congress and actually get elected.
I was going to ask you about your work history, so we got that right in there. When did you decide to run for Congress?
I decided to run for Congress. It was a few weeks after President Obama was elected, when we looked at what he stood for and what he believed in. We knew that we had to have some good people in Washington, D.C. to have some check and balance. For a couple of years, from 2008 until 2010, we saw an unchecked Congress. So I didn't do anything, of course, in 2008, but in 2010, watching so many pieces of legislation being forced through against the will of the American people, I knew I had to do something. So it was probably just about a month or two after the 2008 election cycle that I decided that I had to run for something. I didn't know what.
You have 10 children. 4 girls and 6 boys. What is it like to manage a household with 10 children?
Managing a household with 10 children it's actually quite fun. All of them have different personalities, but the funnest part is around the holiday season, when everybody is home now, because we've got a few that aren't living at the house, but with the kids all growing up, it's one of those things to where when it's dinner time, you have to show up on time, otherwise you're probably not going to get the good part of the dinner. So, but just watching the kids interact, being part of their interaction is just the greatest thing on earth, is to be a dad, and watching them blossom and grow, and watching my wife Christy. She's just a wonderful, not only a wonderful wife, but a wonderful mother, and really just has a passion for getting these kids raised. She stayed home. She hasn't had to work outside of the home. I'm always careful. I used to be, when I was in the financial services industry, I always asked the spouses, well, do you work outside the home? Because raising children is a full-time job, and it's a tough job, and it's an important job, and it's pretty interesting to raise those kids. But we're pretty proud of all of them. I have one that's serving in the military, my son Levi. He's out at Fort Bragg now. He's going to be a Green Beret. He's going through the selection process now, and we're pretty darn proud of him. A story that I like to tell folks about my son Levi is he went to college, and what happened was he had a girlfriend. They broke up, and then he got kind of down in the dumps, and he decided he was going to go into the military. Well, Mom told him, hey, Dad wants to talk to you about, you signing into the Army. And so he came up to me and he says, hey, Dad, I heard you want to talk to me, but let me say a few words before you talk to me. And I said, well, go ahead, Levi. And he says, well, first off I wanted to do this since I was 4 years old. And he did. I mean, the kid was in G.I. Joe outfits. He had all the toys. And he says, I'm in the best physical shape of my life. And he kind of fanned his chest. And I said to him, my wife, Christy, was sitting right next to me. I said, I used to look like that. And she said, you've never looked like that. So I kind of chuckled on that. But then he looked me right square in the eyes. And he said, Dad, I want to serve my country. And it was at that point that I teared up. And I believe that our military men and women, it's a calling. This is an all-volunteer Army. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about making sure that our veterans and our heroes are taken care of when they come back home. We have an obligation. We have so many of them coming back, PTSD, other issues, and we've got to be there for them because they were there for us.
How did you meet your wife?
I met my wife Christy. She was only 16 years old. My sister was married to her uncle, and we were at a family reunion. And I'll never forget this because she was this skinny little thing. She had braces, and I thought to myself, she's kind of cute, and nothing really happened. And then one day I was driving down the road on my motorcycle, and I seen her grandfather's convertible Skylark. It's an older 1970s Skylark, kind of an antique. And I pulled over and I said, "Hey, what's going on?" I was really nervous because at this time she was 18 and she was just drop dead gorgeous. And she says, "Well, I've got a broken hose on the vehicle." I said, "Well, I could fix that for you." So it was freezing out, by the way. It was in the 40s. I was dressed appropriately. So I went to the auto parts place and I got the part. I came back over and put it on, and it was really awkward because I get real nervous, around pretty girls like my wife. So anyway, it was just shortly after that I asked her out and we started dating, and we fell in love with one another, and we ended up getting married about a little bit over a year and a half later. But she's just been a great friend, a companion, and we've been married for 28 years. I always like to tell folks out there in the political world that as long as when we're working to fix things here in America, is that we're not going to agree on everything, and it's the same thing with marriage. Christy and I don't agree on everything, but at the end of the day we're still married, and at the end of the day we're all still Americans.
When you were elected, you forego a lot of the things that you were entitled to. Tell me about that.
When I got elected, what I did was I rejected the congressional pension. I rejected the congressional health care, the Cadillac plan that they offer. I term limited myself. I slept in my office. I went out there to serve. I didn't go out there for a career. It was the right thing to do. I don't believe that our founders for one moment set this up for people to go out to Washington, D.C. or the state capitol, as far as that goes, to make a career. I believe that what they did is they set this up for just regular folks like us to go out, whether it's Washington or the State House, take your tool belt off. Doesn't matter if you're making pizzas, you're working on the line at John Deere or Caterpillar, if you're farming. Take your tool belt off, you set it to the side, you go in and you serve for a certain amount of time, and then you come back home and you put your tool belt back on and you go back to work. And I think that is so important to do. I call it leading by example. And one of the things I found is that after I rejected the congressional health care, several other members of Congress also did that, which that's what Dad taught us as kids. You got to lead by example, and and show people here's the right way to do things. And by doing the different agreements that I did with the district of rejecting that stuff, a lot of folks followed, and I thought it was very good, and it kind of set the stage for future generations.
Your race, Illinois 17, what do you think the choice is about for the voter?
I think the choice for the voter in the Illinois 17th district is, a former congressman that has a voting record and actually got some things done. If you look at the Rock Island Arsenal, for 30 years almost, they were looking for 3 provisions to be put into the law. I reached across the aisle to Dave Loebsack. He's a Democrat, and within 6 months, we got these 3 provisions that they wanted through that others couldn't do in 30 years. We got it done in 6 months. At the end of that year, the president signed it into law. We look at the Veterans Bill that we authored. Key bill that was the right thing to do. It wasn't a Democrat or a Republican issue. It was an American issue. It was a hero issue as far as that goes. But I think that when the people really truly look at the records and not the straw man out there, I think they're going to have a very clear choice of who's going to really help the next generation, who's going to help the working poor, who's going to help the middle class. I am middle class. I started out as a struggling individual just like a lot of folks, and just continued to work hard and got to where I'm at. But I think that the other side of it is going to be more of the same old that's gotten Illinois into this big mess. The opposition has nothing to point to for success. So instead what will happen is she'll come in and attack me and personally and my family and things like that, but no real no real success things, stories that she can, I want to talk about, hey, I got this passed, I did this, instead of her being able to talk about her successes, she's going to come right on the attack, which is too bad, because I think that's exactly what the American people are tired of, is the attacks. They want to know what's the problem, what's the solution, and what do what can you do about it?
This has been one of the longest recoveries from recession that we've ever experienced. And some say it's gone on for far too long, and that the policies of this administration and the Democratic members of the Senate who are holding up a lot of it. What do you think needs to be done to turn around the economy?
I think there's several things that could be done right away to fix our economy. The other side of the aisle believes that we can fix the economy by spending more money. We've never, ever, no one has ever spent their way out of any recession, and we're not going to be, part of a new breed of that. So I think that what we have to do is we've got to get the over-regulations under control. And look, we have to have regulations because you have to keep bad players in check. Also, our taxes here on a corporate level are just, they're the highest in the world. We've got to make it to where we're able to compete and beat anybody, and we can do that by leveling the playing field. One of the things that I think is really important is to allow also is a lot of the offshore money that's sitting over from other companies, of our companies here in the United States are sitting offshore, is to let that money come back. America is one of the very few countries that has people pay the taxes with wherever they're making the product, and then when they want to bring it back to the United States, then we want to penalize them again and hit them for another 35%. If we were to eliminate that or drop it down, which I think would be great, we could probably put, I know there's in excess of $1.3 million or $3 trillion offshore, and I think that that's really, really important. Just a couple of the things that we could do.
How should we be handling the crisis at the border?
The crisis on the border is just so out of control. I mean, think about this. If you got a 4 or 10-year-old kid and you're going to put them on a train and send them across the country, that's just so awful to do. I think that it's really important to know. I mean, think about your kids that you might have out there. Mom keeps an eye. I mean, if they cross the street, we're wanting to know where they're at. But to send them all the way over here, to cross into America, I just think it is sad. This is another one of those lack of leaderships here on this administration. What we've got to do is we've got to make darn sure that the border is secure. We need to know who's coming in here, and it's just, this is America. I mean, we don't know who's coming in right now, and who knows who's here, who's coming. It's a very, very frustrating thing that we can't. And then they try to tie the hands of other leaders throughout different states. This crisis on the border is purely the president's. This is all on his shoulders. I mean, he's the guy that started this. Think about it. You're sending 4-year-old kids. The parents are putting them on a train and shipping them here to the United States, not knowing what's going to happen to them, the risk of their lives, and they could be abducted, they could be abused. I mean, you name it. Anything can happen to these little guys, and this is not justice for people. This is not what we want to have happening. Here in America, we'll take anyone. Give us your tired, your poor. But this is not the way we immigrate to the United States.
And if you were going to, give me the, what would a good immigration policy look like as compared to what we're seeing now?
I think a good immigration policy would be a couple of things. Number one is we secure the border, and then what we have to do is we have to find out who's here. Once we find out who's here, then what we do is we have them pay a penalty, and then we have them go to the back of the line and come on through and become citizens of the United States. But look, we have to be compassionate about this. We all got here some way, somehow, and it's so darn important that we allow folks to come here. But we do have a rule of law, and we've got to make sure that we're putting that rule of law to use. I think it's important that we work on immigration reform. It has to be done. It's a hot topic for anybody in politics, but I think the right thing to do would be to allow the folks that are here in the United States of America, we find out who they are, we have them pay a fine, and then we have them get into the line. We don't allow for amnesty, and we have them, go through the line and get a working permit or what have you. But I don't think that you do amnesty for these folks.